Hello, hockey fans, and welcome to another episode of Anatomy of a Season, the show where we take a look at a given season of a given hockey team, what all led up to it, the season, how it progresses, the changes they make, and how it all comes to be, and so on and so on. Now, we've covered champions such as the 93 Habs, the 97 Red Wings, the 83 Islanders, 2012 Kings, and the 84 Oilers. Great teams indeed. I've covered teams that have made big playoff runs, such as the 08 Penguins and the 88 Devils, and teams that we've had a good laugh at the expense of, such as the 82 Leafs, 90 Nordiques, and more recently the 81 Jets. But in this episode, I'll be covering a team with a lot of talent, but still much in need of direction. But they would embark on an unforgettable season in ways that even their own fans couldn't have imagined. I'm talking about the 1990-91 Minnesota North Stars. Yeah, look at this bunch of guys. I don't really have a lot of clever jokes here, but I will say that they do have a big look on their face of, as if to say, yeah, things could be better, but they could also be worse. And also saying, well, we're hopeful for the best. We'll see what happens. So how did this club come to be? Well, it's time for a backstory. Minnesota has always been a hockey haven for young American fans and people who want to play the game. And when the NHL underwent their first major expansion in 1967, one of the 6 new clubs was indeed the Minnesota North Stars out of Bloomington, Minnesota, and the brand new Met Center Arena would house them. Fans in the land of 1,000 Lakes were excited for professional hockey at last coming their way. By the 1970-71 season, they were showing a lot of growth, upsetting the St. Louis Blues in the playoffs, their fellow expansion club, and taking the Montreal Canadiens to 6 games. In the 1971-72 season, they had their first winning year. Stars emerged on the team, pardon the pun, such as Danny Grant, J.P. Parise, Jude Druin, Dennis Hextall, and the team's first icon, Bill Goldsworthy. They had solid legs on defense too, Doug Mons, Barry Gibbs, Ted Harris, and goaltenders Cesar Maniago and seasoned ageless veteran Gump Worsley. But things fell apart pretty quick. Questionable moves from up above, as well as issues with some players, were causing a lot of friction within the organization. And from 1973-74 to the 77-78 season, they missed the playoffs every year. In 1977-78, they were the absolute worst team in the NHL. Also, the team was in danger of folding, as fan attendance had dwindled and ownership was terrible. After a merger between the Stars and the failing Cleveland Barons, the Stars suddenly became under the ownership of the Gunn family, mainly George Gunn III. However, the Stars had a new general manager by the name of Lou Nanne. Now, Lou does not get the credit he deserves that, say, Herb Brooks or even Bob Johnson get in terms of changing the face of American hockey. Now, Lou was Canadian-born. He was from Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, but after enrolling in the University of Minnesota, America became his home, and he played all 635 games of his career as a defenseman for the Stars. And he knew what many NHL scouts didn't about the American hockey system, and seemed to have the inside track with the future of American hockey. As a matter of fact, he was friends with his former U.S. national team teammate, Herb Brooks. Right away, Nanne made an impact on the 1978 NHL draft, and of course, takes the first overall pick and the top prospect, and that would be Ottawa 67 superstar Bobby Smith. Now, whenever a team hits a rebuilding phase, you need that one guy you can build around, and Lou saw that in Bobby Smith. And he made a great pick in the second round, choosing big left winger Steve Payne, Smith's teammate in Ottawa, and Kurt Giles was a steal of a pick, a defenseman in the 4th round who was from the University of Minnesota. Lou had a vision of building around these young talents, and while the Stars missed the playoffs for a 6th straight season, they saw some growth, and Glenn Saunders became the team's head coach. And at the infamous 1979 NHL entry draft, Lou continued with his top-notch scouting team to make big picks. In the first round, they chose Craig Hartsburg, who was going to lead their defensive core, also sizable forward Tom McCarthy, and future U.S. Olympian and another University of Minnesota alum, Neil Broughton. Neil was actually months away from being part of the Miracle on Ice for Team USA in Lake Placid. In 1979-80, the Stars had their first winning season since 72-73 and made their first playoff appearance since that very year. Smith, along with Payne, as well as Al McAdam and Tim Young, were leading the forwards. Young Hartsburg was leading the defenseman, and veteran Joe Meloche was in net. They sweep out Sittler and the Leafs for their first series win since 1971, and then in a huge shocker, they eliminate the 4-time defending Stanley Cup champion Montreal Canadiens in 7 games, putting themselves into a huge spotlight, derailing that team's dynasty. They made it to the semifinals, but the first-place Flyers beat them out in 5. The team continued to grow, however, under Lou's management and Saunders' guidance. As in the 1980-81 season, the team was growing further, and during the season they added a young undrafted power forward by the name of Dino Ciccarelli. Also a new young goaltender to back up Meloche by the name of Dom Beaupre. The Stars make the playoffs again. They sweep out a young Ray Bourque and the Bruins. They beat Perreault and the Sabres in 5 games, as well as Kent Nilsson and the Cinderella Flames in 6. And the Stars made it to their first ever Stanley Cup final. but were beaten out in 5 games by a New York Islanders team, and let's face it, nobody was beating the Islanders in this era. But some were saying the Stars could very well be the team of the future and can even give the promising Edmonton Oilers a lot to handle. The 1981-82 season saw the Stars have 94 points and win their first regular season division title. And Bobby Smith had a monster 114-point season, while Cicerelli notches 106. Neil Braun, in his first full season as a rookie, had 98 points and was up for the Calder Trophy. Payne, McAdam, Young, and Kristoff produced as well, as Hartsburg has a great season backed up very well by Giles, as well as the tough Gordy Roberts and Brad Maxwell, while Milosh was great in net, but a playoff upset by the hands of the Chicago Blackhawks ended their season in heartbreak in the first round. Lou had made this team into an exciting bunch, but his last couple draft picks have been somewhat questionable. In 1980, he took forward Brad Palmer, but 1 pick later, Brent Sutter was taken by the Islanders. However, Lou would rectify this mistake before it could even really be made. I'll get to that in a second. In 1981, Lou drafted Ron Meehan of the Niagara Falls Flyers 13th overall. 2 picks later, Al MacInnis, a future Hall of Famer, was taken by the Calgary Flames. Meehan only played 7 games for the Stars before his career fizzled out. Now, to be fair, Palmer did have a good first full rookie season, but Lou saw the writing on the wall, or did he just see a better upside going into the 1982 draft with Brian Bellows, the superstar, I should say, of the Kitchener Rangers, who had just won the OHL championship and had made 2 Memorial Cup appearances, winning 1. And on top of it all, Sports Illustrated had printed a story saying he's the hottest prospect since Gretzky. Okay, well, with all due respect to Brian, as again, I love the 93 Habs, this is not at all true. Not even close, but be that as it may, he was the top prospect and he'd be a great choice for Minnesota. Now, they won the 2nd overall pick due to a trade with Detroit prior, but he did indeed sacrifice Palmer, Lou that is, to the Bruins in a deal that was put in writing that the Bruins will not draft Bellows 1st overall. And indeed, Lou made a great move here, maybe one of the best of his general managing career, as the Bruins will pick Gord Kluzak, whose career never panned out due to injuries. The Stars improved to 96 points in the 82-83 season as Smith, Payne, McCarthy, Cicerelli, Broughton, and Bellows worked a superb system that allowed all of them to produce on equal footing, making them a danger every which way. Hartsburg was leading a solid defensive core, and while they beat Toronto in 4 games in the first round in a best-of-5 series, they fell to division rival Chicago once again, who had a great season in the division final. In the 1983 draft, however, the Stars won the 1st overall pick due to a trade with Pittsburgh, as Lou pulled a page into Sam Pollock's book, it seemed, year after year, and was playing these last-place clubs like fools, and he used it to pick Brian Lawton. Now, okay, yes, Lawton on paper was an upper-tier prospect, and yes, Lou was ahead of the curve when it came to American-born talent. He's proven that, as Lawton was indeed the first American taken 1st overall in the draft. And the crazy thing about this pick is that they almost redeemed themselves with the Ron Meehan pick here, but they just traded a bust to Pittsburgh for someone who was slightly less of a bust. Look, I mean, you gotta understand, I know how sometimes on paper things look better at the draft, and you can only look back on hindsight, but some picks just were not good from the get-go. I mean, look who was picked just 2 and 3 picks respectively after Lawton. And say, yeah, old Lou dropped the ball on this one. Now, again, like I said, you can't be too hard on these GMs for these picks. Again, some look better on paper than the others do, but Pat LaFontaine shouldn't have been the 2nd pick, let alone the 3rd, which he ended up being. He was a clear-cut number 1 with what he had accomplished in junior hockey. And Yzerman, even though he was number 4 overall, was still overlooked in a lot of ways by the teams above the wings in this draft. Just goes to show you. Also, look at some of the other players taken after Lawton. Yeah. So yeah, LaFontaine, Yzerman, and at number 5, Barrasso were all consecutive future Hall of Famers. And look at this, pick 6 and 7, John McClain played nearly 1,200 games and became a legend in New Jersey. Russ Cornell played in over 1,000 games, and while not a Hall of Famer, was definitely an asset to the teams he played for. And number 9, Cam Neely, who managed a Hall of Fame career despite his numerous injuries. Yeah, I know the benefit of hindsight, again, blah, 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 but yeah, Lou really blew it here. And to top it off, early in the 1983-84 season, they shockingly traded Bobby Smith to Montreal in exchange for Mark Napier and Keith Acton. Again, both tremendous hockey players, but I don't think at the time they were really worth a Bobby Smith. Napier could score 30 or 40 goals in the past and played all 97 games for the Stars and racked up 69 points. Not terrible, really, but he'd be shipped to Edmonton and won his 2nd Stanley Cup ring. Acton would be there longer. He actually played 343 games for the Stars, had 235 points, not bad, but was a minus 36. Bobby Smith during 7 seasons in Montreal, 505 games played, 482 points, a plus 35, 84 points in 97 playoff games, and oh yes, a Stanley Cup ring. But the Stars were not complete failures, well, at least not at first, as they won the division again in 83-84 with Broughton, Ciccarelli, and Bellows leading the way up front. However, Craig Hartsburg suffered injuries and only played 26 games, but Brad Maxwell and Gordy Roberts picked up the slack. But the goaltending was weakening as Melange and Beaupre had a rough year, but they made it all the way to the conference final. But of course, it's 1984. It's the Edmonton Oilers. Yeah. The next year, however, things were all starting to go to hell, more or less, starting, of course, with the draft. The Stars took defenseman David Quinn, who never played a single game in the NHL, and I'm starting to think that Lou took him simply because he was American. If he wanted an American, Kevin Hatcher was still on the board at the time. The Stars won 25 games in the 84-85 season. Their Top Guns were not producing. Ciccarelli missed 29 games, and even when he was healthy, he wasn't playing that well. Dennis Merrick, a former All-Star in Washington, was on the team at this point. He was a reliable goal scorer in the past, but just really wasn't doing much here. And Tony McKegney, again, a consistent 20-goal scorer, but again, neither were lending much to this team. Their coaching situation was also a mess. Bill Mahoney took over the prior season for Glenn Somner, who's going through some personal issues. Mahoney was fired this season, Somner was back. The Stars squeaked into the playoffs somehow by simply not being as awful as Toronto, and did manage to pull off a shocking upset against the Blues in an opening round sweep, and took Chicago to 6 games before being eliminated. Lorne Henning took over as coach in 85-86, and things looked to be promising again. They won 38 games, had 85 points. Hartsburg was healthy again, but at this point they had parted ways with goaltender Gilles Melange as Don Beaupre became the starter and John Casey was the backup. Now, I talked about this in my Joe Nieuwendyk video in part 1 of that series, where a monster trade was made to Calgary, as superstar Kent Nilsson had joined the Stars this season. Kent played okay, but nowhere near his usual standards. But Broughton was great. Ciccarelli and Bellows were back to form. Scott Bustad was seen to be a star in the making. They finished second in the Norris Division, but lost in the first round to the Blues. Now, okay, I won't harp on much of the 85-86 draft classes because a lot of teams didn't come out of that one looking too well. But of course, things still go further downhill. The Stars had a terrible 86-87 season, winning just 30 games and missing the playoffs. Despite a great season from Ciccarelli, but Broughton missed 34 games due to injuries, Bellows missed 15, Ken Nilsson was traded to Edmonton and won his first Stanley Cup as a result. All the Stars got was money and draft picks that never panned out. They did seem to have a nice, really good kept secret with two-way forward Dirk Graham. Yeah, he'd be gone the following year. They also fired Lord Henning with just 2 games left and Somner was back behind the bench. But then Lou went to his old friend, the catalyst and the coach of the Miracle on Ice, Herb Brooks, who had some success coaching the Rangers before this. Well, the Stars went from being simply bad to god-awful. In the 87-88 season, 19 wins, dead last in the league. Least goals scored, second most goals given up. Ciccarelli misses 13 games, yet still leads the team in scoring. Bellows has a pretty good year. Broughton misses 26 games. Hartsburg misses 53. Steve Payne, who looked to be a star in the making, played just 79 games in 3 seasons and retires. A team that once showed great promise has hit rock bottom. And alas, the Lunatic era was over. Some thought it would at least produce 1 Stanley Cup, but it didn't come to fruition. Everything across the board was now just plain bad. And despite all the good and hope he gave the team, Lou was finished. However, not before the 1988 NHL draft. On June 11, 1988, Lou was 3 days away from departing the team, but his last act as GM would be huge. The Stars had the first overall pick. Taken first overall in the 1988 NHL entry draft from the Prince Albert Raiders of the WHL, Livonia, Michigan-born Mike Modano. A speedy centerman with some size who wasn't afraid to make a hit and get a little aggressive, but yet kept it clean for the most part, was the runaway number 1 prospect, and Lou Nanne left his team with a huge gift. In just 2 years of junior hockey at that point, he had 79 goals, 110 assists for 189 points in 135 games. In the 1987-88 season alone, he had 47 goals, 80 assists for 127 points in just 65 games, and averaged nearly 2 points a game. And now is up to general manager Jack Ferreira and new head coach Pierre Paget and how he'll affect the Stars' future. But he'll spend the 1988-89 season in the juniors. The rebuilding phase had begun. However, the 1988-89 season for the Stars, and barely a week into the season, they finally gave up on Brian Lawton, trading him along with Igor Liba and the rights to Rick Bennett for the rights to Brett Barnett, a 3rd-round pick in 89, Paul Gerard, Mike Sullivan, and a nice addition to their defense, undrafted Mark Tenorti. Also, the Stars parted ways with goalie Don Beaupre to the Capitals, and Ferraro was making many small trades, which isn't a bad thing necessarily. The Stars saw the emergence of Dave Gainey as one of their top stars, as a left winger would lead the team in scoring. Injury was still a major issue. Brian Bellows missed 20 games, Broughton missed 12 and saw a slip in production, and Dino Ciccarelli was still consistent. The team was still lacking in some areas, but the Norris division was very weak that year, and as time was going on, they looked like they might make the playoffs. However, on March 7, 1989, they make one of the biggest trades in the history of the team. They parted ways with superstar Dino Ciccarelli, who became one of the greatest players in the team's history, but he had also become a bit of a headache somewhat, with some of his vicious assaults on ice, as well as some of his actions and activities off of it. And he, along with promising defenseman Bob Rouse, a traditional stay-at-home defenseman who has a lot of toughness, in exchange for defenseman Larry Murphy and all-star forward the speedy Mike Gartner. And indeed, Paget wanted more speed and finesse up front, and Gartner could certainly provide that. He was also one of the most consistent players in the league. Before the trade, all seasons he spent with Washington, he had 397 goals, 392 assists for 789 points in 771 games, was an excellent plus 61. He has also scored 30 goals or more in all 9 NHL seasons he has played prior, and has 26 this season as of the trade. He was also a good penalty killer to boot. He had played 4 NHL All-Star games. He also won 2 Canada Cups with Team Canada in 1984 and 87, and has played in 3 World Hockey Championship tournaments, winning 2 bronze medals in 82 and 83, also appearing in the 81 tournament before that. He had 26 goals, 29 assists for 55 points, and was a plus 8 this season in 56 games. This is a huge grab for the Stars. And defenseman Larry Murphy is also a really huge grab, grossly underrated, yet still a star in Washington, as well as his early years in Los Angeles, a highly skilled blue liner who has played 9 seasons, could command a rush, was a great setup man for assists and passes, was rock solid in an actual defensive position, creating turnovers. In the 9 seasons before the trade, he had 138 goals, 414 assists for 552 points. He was a plus 56 in 695 games. He was a finalist for the Norris Trophy and a second-team All-Star in the 86-87 season. He's also a finalist for the Calder Trophy as Rookie of the Year in the 80-81 with the Kings, and scored 76 points, still a record as of 2023 for a rookie defenseman. Internationally, he has had great success with a Canada Cup win in 87, silver medal at the World Hockey Championships in 1985, and played in the 87 tournament. Craig Hartsburg will retire due to numerous injuries this year, so this was a huge grab. The Stars made the playoffs and finished third in the Norris with a 27-37-16 record for 70 points, but were beaten by the Blues in 5 games. For the 1989-90 season, the Stars saw a bit of growth. Mike Modano was ready to become the next big star in Minnesota, as he would be added to the team and play his rookie year. They obtained two-way specialist and grinding forward Gaetan Duchesne, and the team was actually showing signs of improvements. Brian Bellows had a banner season, the best of his career, 55 goals and 99 points, and was named a second-team All-Star. Neil Broughton was healthy and back to his old self, it seemed. Gainey had 40 goals, and Mike Modano had 75 points in 80 games, and was a runner-up for the Calder Trophy as the league's top rookie. Duchesne, along with Stu Gavin, Don Barber, and Perry Berezan contributed nicely. Larry Murphy, along with team captain Kurt Giles, led a growing defense and included Mark Tenorti, Sean Chambers, and then also John Casey, their goaltender, won 31 games that year. But on March 6, 1990, Ferraro made a strange move that didn't make much sense to a lot of people at the time, trading Mike Gartner, who was having an excellent year with 70 points in 67 games, to the New York Rangers for a 4th-round draft pick in 1990, which didn't pan out. Future considerations, which ended up being a 1991 4th-rounder, which ended up being traded to the Kings, who picked up Alexei Yezhitnik, who played 1,100 NHL games, and the principal of the trade, Ulf Dahlen. Now, the Stars felt that Gartner, who was 30, was expendable, and they wanted a youthfully skilled player and with size up front. And Dahlen, a Swedish import, was a former first-round draft pick of the Rangers, and in 3 seasons had 131 points in 189 games and was a -5, so decent numbers across the board. And before the trade in the 89-90 season, he had 18 each in goals and assists and was a -4 in 63 games. Gartner too old, you say, huh? Well, the guy played 8 more seasons and had at least 30 goals in all but 2 of them. Dahlen was a serviceable forward who could play an important role, but was it really worth a Gartner? The Stars went 36-40-4 in the 1989-90 season, finishing 4th in the Norris and again making the playoffs, showing much growth, and they took the heavily favored Chicago Blackhawks to the limit at 7 games in the opening round, but they'd ultimately lose. This is where our story truly begins. From the sounds of it, there were no plans for general manager Jack Ferreira or coach Pierre Paget to lose their jobs in the offseason. However, George Gunn III, the owner of the Stars, had long desired to bring hockey back to the Bay Area, as he was indeed the owner of the California Seals franchise, or at least one of the owners, that ultimately failed and moved to Cleveland, who then merged with the Stars, as I mentioned earlier. He tried to move the Stars to the West Coast in the late 1980s, but the league vetoed the move. The Stars were not a big market team, and they had their struggles financially, but it wasn't seen as enough to move them. However, when Howard Baldwin, former owner of the Whalers, led a group that wanted to bring hockey to San Jose, so the league formed a compromise. The Guns would sell their share of the Stars to the Baldwin Group, and the Guns in return would receive a new hockey franchise in San Jose. What the hell? And yes, thus the San Jose Sharks were born. Both teams would participate in an expansion draft. Yeah, try figuring this one out. Meaning the Stars, however, will also lose players to the Sharks. Man, the NHL is really gutting this organization, but we're not quite there yet. The Sharks won't enter the league until 1991-92. However, Jack Ferrara was named the team's general manager in May of 1990, while Pierre Pagé left the Stars in order to take a coach and general manager role with the ailing and failing Quebec Nordiques. After making strides and improvement the last 2 seasons, the Stars were now without a GM, they're without a coach, their team was about to be depleted in the following year. After making strides and improvement the last 2 seasons, the Stars were now without anyone to guide them. This is a huge setback to get this team, and they looked like they were starting to get back on track. However, on June 8, 1990, the Stars would hire someone more than capable of handling a general manager's job. Bob Clarke, aka Bobby Clarke, an icon in the city of Philadelphia due to his Hall of Fame career, spending 15 seasons he played for the Philadelphia Flyers, and towards the end of his career he was learning the ropes of the office, and took over as the team's general manager right when he retired in 1984. And in his 6 seasons heading up the office, the Flyers went 256, 177, and 47, and missed the playoffs just once, and that was the last season he was there in 1989-90. They made the Stanley Cup Finals twice, made the Conference Finals 3 times total, and even back then Clarke was somewhat controversial, but he was a mover and shaker who knew how to win. And it's just what this franchise needs at the end of the day. This was seen as a very good thing for the Stars, but now they needed a coach as well, and the choice was somewhat of a shocker to many people. A future Hall of Famer in his own right as a player, Bob Gainey, who played 16 seasons for the Montreal Canadiens, winning 5 Stanley Cups and 4 straight of the first ever Selke Awards as the top defensive forward in the NHL. He had tremendous leadership skills, which means he likely would be a candidate to be a coach one day. But his experience consists of 1 season as a player coach in France for the Epinal Squirrels of the French National 1B division. He still has some spark as a player, actually. He had 14 goals and 12 assists for 26 points in 18 games while over there. So Gainey has experience, but not to the extent that is really looked for among hiring NHL head coaches. A lot of experts, analysts, and pundits question this move in a big way. As a matter of fact, the 1990 NHL draft took place just over a week after Clarke was hired at BC Place in Vancouver, and their first rounder was a huge one, taking 8th overall Darian Hatcher of the North Bay Centennials of the Ontario Hockey League, born in Sterling Heights, Michigan. His brother Kevin was in the midst of a successful NHL career at this point, and Darian had many positive attributes that his brother also brought to the table, including an imposing presence at 6'5", tough, hard-hitting, and tremendous leadership qualities. Darian, however, will not see action in this video, as he will not join the team for another year, but guaranteed he's going to be a key to their future. Their other draft picks, however, would not. Outside of Hatcher, the other picks wouldn't even quite make it to 100 games combined with the Stars. Enrico Ciccone was a fan favorite and enforcer wherever he played, but only played 42 games for the Stars, while Roman Turek was a reliable backup, who had great numbers, playing 55 games, but was best known for his years with St. Louis and Calgary from 99 to 03. And the fact is, with a minuscule budget and not much money to throw around, Clarke and Gainey, 2 men who played against each other as adversaries, and had also been teammates for the Team Canada in the infamous 76 Canada Cup team, and winning a bronze together even at the 82 World Championship, they had 7 Stanley Cup rings between them, and knew what it took to make a winning formula, so who knows what could happen when they put their heads together. And hey, what do you do when you're in this situation? Well, you go to the men you trust to make you a winner. And a third Bob would be brought into the fold on August 7, 1990, as they would make a trade to the Montreal Canadiens, sacrificing a 4th-round pick in 1992 for Gainey's former teammate, Bobby Smith. Yes, indeed, that Bobby Smith, who I mentioned earlier, was going to return to Minnesota. Smith himself has been a model of consistency and grew to be a great leader, who played a fearless style, and his specialty was that of a setup man, as in 891 career games in 12 seasons, he has scored 328 goals, 604 assists for 932 points. He has appeared in 3 NHL All-Star games as a career plus 34, also won a bronze medal with Clarke and Gainey at the 82 World Championships, and also played in the 1979 Championships. But Smith Also has a Stanley Cup ring to his credit as a member of the '86 Canadiens, a key part of that team, and played another Stanley Cup final in 1989. But his scoring touch diminished greatly in an injury-plagued 89-90 season, playing just 53 games and scoring 26 points and was a -4. When the deal was made, some people thought it was pointless. However, this would be the part where Brad Pitt would point to Jonah Hill and say, "We brought him in because," and the answer would be, he has playoff experience. And the Stars do need that. Smith has played in 152 playoff games and scored 139 points, and again has played in the Stanley Cup Final 3 times, and has only suffered a first-round playoff exit once in his career, and that was with the Stars back in 1982. Also, Smith was the man Minnesota was going to build their success around in the 80s, as the 1978 first overall pick and Rookie of the Year in 78-79. He is now returning home, and he can still provide veteran leadership and solid two-way play. General Manager Bob Clarke wanted someone that he knew he could trust to produce as well, snagging free agent Brian Propp. Indeed, Bob Clarke knows this man very well, a highly skilled two-way left winger who is a consistent scorer and efficiently well used on the penalty kill. Clarke played alongside him as his teammate for 5 seasons and as his boss in the office for more than 6 seasons they spent together. In the 804 games that Propp played in his career, all but 14 were played with the Flyers. And this is why people were on Clarke's case for this deal, as he traded him last season while he was still managing the Flyers, but signed him to his new team. Well, the answer is simple from Clarke. That was Philadelphia. This is Minnesota. Things are different. And he was right. Propp was always a very popular fan favorite in the 11 seasons he spent in Philly and played in 3 Stanley Cup Finals in 1980, 85, and 87. He played in 5 NHL All-Star games, 861 points in 804 games, and a monster plus 301. Amazing, but like Bobby Smith, his scoring had diminished a lot due to injuries. In the 1989 Stanley Cup playoffs, after a savage hit from Montreal All-Star defenseman Chris Chelios, Propp hasn't really been the same. He has missed several games because of it. In the 89-90 season, he played 54 games, 40 with the Flyers, then after he was traded to the Bruins, played 14 more. He had 40 points in those 54 games, and he played pretty well in the playoffs for the Bruins, making his 4th Stanley Cup appearance, but still came up short. Propp was on the infamous 1987 Canada Cup winning team for Team Canada, and won 2 straight World Championship bronzes, but the criticism for picking him was ever present. But Brad Pitt, why did the Stars take him? And point to Jonah Hill. He has playoff experience. 4 finals appearances, 125 points, 136 playoff games. Clarke also grabbed longtime Flyers forward and Finnish import Jukka Sinisalo, a reliable goal scorer who is also an asset on special teams and has scored at least 20 goals 6 times in 9 seasons. But he's battled several injury issues himself, but Clarke knows him well and feels he's reliable with 409 points and an amazing plus 132 in 526 games. And he's coming off 23 goals and 23 assists for 46 points in 1989-90. Also on August 21st, Clarke made a trade that would have barely been a blurb in a newspaper at this point, but the Stars sent prospect Ken Hodge to the Boston Bruins to play for his dad's pro hockey alma mater in exchange for a 4th-round draft pick in 1992. That draft pick would end up being Jiri Lehtinen. Yep, I'd say the Stars won that trade fairly well. Also, as the season was approaching, Clarke also obtained Peter Taglianetti from the Jets to try to toughen up the defense even further. And the odds makers weren't really giving the Stars a snowball's chance in hell at even making the playoffs, let alone a Stanley Cup. They were in a 3-way tie for 16th of the best odds of the 21 teams to win the Cup, tied with Pittsburgh and Philly at plus 3,000. Minnesota's division rivals were all ahead of them. The Toronto Maple Leafs at 2,500 showed some heavy improvement the year prior, obtaining a winning record for the first time in 11 seasons. The Red Wings weren't seen as a bad team, just one that had a bad year. The Blues had been growing dramatically since building their team around Brett Hull, and the Chicago Blackhawks looked to be the NHL's next superpower, as they were given really good odds. But who can blame the odds makers on this one? On paper, the 1990-91 Minnesota North Stars, they have excellent players like Neil Broughton and Brian Bellows, who have become, big stars among fans in the towns, but can they stay healthy? Also, on paper, the media saw this team as a group of guys who could stay, if they can stay consistent and healthy, and the additions of Bobby Smith, Brian Propp, and Ilka Sinisalo, however, are a liability because of their injury issues. Dave Gainey emerged as a star, but not seen as a guy you can build things around, while they have their own one prospect in Mike Modano. Role players like Gaetan Duchesne, Perry Barrison, and Stu Gavin, and popular fan favorite tough guy Basil McRae were not seen as a championship formula. Despite good work from their grinders, the health of their top forwards is key, as the Stars were not a very good scoring team last season, despite Bellows' 55 goals. They have their one all-star defenseman, Larry Murphy, and while team captain Kurt Giles is rock solid, and as is young Mark Tenorti, and you throw in Taglianetti as well as Frank Musial and Neil Wilkinson, it's still not exactly the most complete defense in the world. John Casey, their starting netminder, is a tremendous talent. And despite hardships on defense, the Stars are far from bad when it came to goals against last year, but backup Kari Tako has been given many chances to prove himself and hasn't really come through for the team at all. You were left hanging by your GM and coach, who helped you improve, but now you have a GM who has had a fair share of success, but not without controversy, and a coach who was a great player in his day, but very minimal experience. But on the other side, they have a pretty decent power play, and they can try to build on that, and an excellent penalty kill thanks to their role players, and adding Prop to this team will certainly enhance that further if he can stay healthy. But in the overall scope of things, this has potential disaster written all over it. But either way, regardless, time is up, and we are ready for opening nights. On October 4th, 1990, at the Met Center, the Minnesota North Stars opened their season hosting their division rivals, the St. Louis Blues. Of course, the Blues were bolstered by a strong lineup with superstar Brett Hull leading the way, coming off a 72-goal season last year. A lot of those goals were thanks in large part to playmaking center Adam Oates, and they had added longtime Washington Capitals superstar defenseman Scott Stevens in a blockbuster contract deal. Now the Stars took a 1-0 lead on a power play in the first period where Broughton and Smith set up Dave Gainey for the first goal of the season, as Casey was amazing in net. However, the Blues took a 2-1 lead after 2 periods. Brett Hull's second goal of the game made it 3-1, and despite 123 leader Murphy and Broughton setting up Bellows, the Blues were the one to come away with the tight win. Not a terrible showing for the Stars, as it was a tightly contested and grueling game. Again, Casey was the star of this one, and the defense will need to tighten up going forward. 2 days later, they faced Pat LaFontaine in a rebuilding New York Islanders club, and the Stars looked as cohesive in every aspect of the game, and they were a firing squad in on goaltender Glenn Healy, just killing him with 46 shots and hitting their target 4 times in a 4-2 victory. On the other end, Casey played superbly with 27 saves, and Brian Propp, after a bit of a rough night in the opener, had a goal and an assist. And Dave Gainey looks red hot as their defense contained LaFontaine, as Bobby Smith seemed in his face the bulk of the game. Hey, this team doesn't look so bad. Second thought, no, they're crappy. 7-game winless streak commences. First, a trip to New York, backup Jarmo Milles gets the start in net, and Ulf Dallin suits up for the first time this season. He is bombarded, however, Milles that is. Stars lose 6-3, as former Stars winger Mike Gardner makes his former team pay for trading him with 2 goals, as he and Bernie Nichols took them apart. Alright, well, Prop and Bellows had a goal and an assist each. Casey is back in net against a growing New Jersey Devils club on the road, and despite falling behind 2-0, the Stars would tie it, but lost 5-2 as Kirk Muller had Casey's number. Gainey had a goal and a helper. They had a much better showing at Boston Garden, down 3-0 against the defending Wales Conference champions, the Boston Bruins. Young sophomore Mike Modano had a monster of a game, a goal, 2 assists for 3 points, as he led a comeback in a 3-3 tie. Steve Larmer, Michel Goulet, Chris Chelios, Jeremy Roenick, and their powerful division rivals, the Chicago Blackhawks, were all over the Stars, beating them 4-1, however. Then it was out to La La Land against Gretzky and the Kings. It was a 5-2 loss. Then it was out to St. Louis, where they managed a 2-2 tie with the Blues, as Gainey had a goal and a helper each. And Chicago just annihilated the Stars again at 7-1 at Chicago Stadium, a complete embarrassment of a game that saw the sports media in Minnesota rip them to shreds, calling out Gainey and Clarke, the latter of whom was showing visible frustration with the club. Bellows and Broughton had been called out for their lackluster play by the media, while Murphy and the defense and even Casey were taking a task for this one. However, the Stars broke the streak in a nice win over Ron Francis and a decent Hartford Whalers team at home, and it went 3-0 as John Casey was tremendous in a 33-save shutout. Gainey continues to look sharp with 2 goals, but the whole team seemed to be on the same page in this one, as everyone all around was contributing here. On October 26, 1990, however, Clarke took action and traded fan-favorite defenseman, the dirty scrapper Frank Musil, to Calgary for another defenseman Brian Glynn. The Stars wanted a sizable, more disciplined, traditional-style defenseman, and Glynn played 1 full season in Calgary in 87-88 and did pretty good, but was sadly the last in the pecking order of an already very strong all-star-laden defense, and once the team picked up Rob Ramage, his role, diminished as he played only 10 games over the next 2 seasons. He did, however, play very well for the Flames' minor league affiliate, the IHL's Salt Lake Golden Eagles, and some felt he wasn't given a fair shot in Calgary, and perhaps could make a difference in Minnesota. The day of the trade, the Stars began a home-and-home series with the Red Wings, another Norris Division rival who in the late 80s looked like they were on the verge of championship success, but many internal issues derailed hope, and they're on a rebuilding path themselves, led by team captain Steve Yzerman. But the Stars would drop both games. The first was a monster 8-6 shootout, when the Stars actually led 4-3 in the third period, but the Wings scored 3 goals 3-2 apart, and the Stars were stuck playing catch-up. Be that as it may, Larry Murphy was amazing with a goal and 3 helpers, and Bellows and Broughton answered their critics with a goal and 2 assists each for 3 points. Mark Tenorti made his season debut, returning from injury, while Sinsalo showed some life in this game as well. In the game at the Met Center, the Stars led 2-0 after 2 periods, but let the lead slip and had to settle for a 2-2 tie with the Wings. And then off to Maple Leaf Gardens to face a pathetic-looking Leafs team who got off to a terrible start. But the Stars had a terrible collapse in this one. They led 4-1 and would come up short, losing 5-4. Despite a huge game from Broughton with 2 goals and a helper for 3 points, the Stars' backup goaltending is being called into question, ending a bad month of hockey. At this time, the NHL was still using the divisional playoff format, meaning the top 4 teams in each division make it. And, well, it's not a very good start. 2-8-3 for 7 points. 4th place. But that loss to the Leafs put the dead last Leafs just 2 points behind the Stars. And the Stars sit far back, 8 points behind the 3rd place Red Wings, while they, along with the 2nd place Hawks and 1st place Blues, are battling for the top. For the Stars, it's like a pipe dream even at this point in the season. Now the media is portraying Clarke as the guy who tanked the Flyers in his final year there and shouldn't have been hired, while Gainey's experience is borderline laughable behind the bench. Neil Broughton led the team in scoring with 3 goals and 11 assists for 14 points, as his role as the team's primary setup man seems pretty much intact, and more importantly, he is healthy. Brian Bellows has taken some flack from the media, but is still averaging a point a game with 5 goals and 8 assists for 13 points, and is still a great presence up front. And Dave Gainey, despite missing 2 games, had 7 goals, which led the team, and 4 assists for 11 total points, which was 3rd. Mike Modano had some struggles, but had that monster game against the Bruins, while Brian Propp is showing some flashes of his old self from Philadelphia, and Bobby Smith has played reasonably well, but in some games he seems to not be involved all that much. The 3rd and 4th lines, however, saw some shuffling due to inconsistencies and injuries. Sinisalo's not playing well, and sometimes was a healthy scratch. Ulf Dahlen struggled, while Gaetan Duchesne had injury issues and wasn't all that effective when healthy. Same with Perry Berezin, and Mike Craig wasn't playing all that well either. However, Stu Gavin has been really good in checking an offensive presence up front. Speaking of Gavin, he is not only providing tremendous leadership qualities, but has also been their best penalty killer, and amazing along the boards, and best defensive forward all around for the team this month, and led the team in October with a +3. Larry Murphy, to little surprise, led the team's defenseman among scoring, with 2 goals, 5 assists for 7 points. But I would have to say the best defenseman all month was team captain Kurt Giles, playing that traditional style that made great plays to shift momentum, despite not being a scoring defenseman in an era full of them. However, the Stars' defense as a whole still has some issues, as Frank Musial, who wasn't so much terrible as he was just lacking substance in some ways, was sent to Calgary, and now we'll see how Brian Glynn will do. But Mark Tenorti's return to the lineup is very timely now, with the core being a little bit weak. Peter Taglianetti, however, played well in some games, while Neil Wilkinson didn't seem to be producing all that much in the way of anything. Same for Rob Zettler in the games he played. Tenorti can hopefully be the shot in the arm they need. John Casey is carrying a very heavy workload, and while his numbers aren't outstanding, he's been awesome in net many games. Despite his modest 2.43 record and a pretty good 3.15 goals against average, and a pretty good 898 save percentage, keep in mind we're still in the high-scoring era here, folks, and did obtain a shutout in the game against the Whalers. He has more than proven to be their number 1 guy in net, and compared to Kari Taco and Jarmo Myllys, Casey is a Vezina winner in waiting. Both had goals against averages over 6, both lost 2 games each and didn't win a single game, and has save percentages below .850, and both would be gone shortly after this, as this is the only action they'd see all season long in Minnesota. Taco, who had been with the team since 1986, was finished with the club, as was Myllys, as they were both sent to IHL's Kalamazoo Wings. To begin November, it was a trip to visit Mark Howe and the Philadelphia Flyers, and it didn't end well, as Bob Clarke's former team took his current team to the woodshed. The Stars lost 6-3. Broughton had 2 assists in the outing, and Casey, however, played terribly in net. However, Broughton stayed hot, and Casey made up for his last outing with a 24-save shutout against Joe Sakic and the pathetic Nordiques, a 2-0 win on the road in a trip to La Belle Province. Casey was again amazing in a 26-save performance in a 2-2 tie against Patrick Waugh and the Montreal Canadiens at the Forum. The Stars were showing much more focus the last couple games. After these 2 games in Quebec, Bob Clarke started making some deals, however. First, they needed backup goaltender and actually made a trade with the Habs, sending defenseman prospect Jason Moore to Montreal for Brian Hayward. This was a pretty good move. Hayward had won 3 consecutive Jennings trophies, along with All-Star Patrick Waugh, as the duo gave the least amount of goals 3 years in a row in 87, 88, and 89. Hayward, however, had a rough 1989-90 season with a 10-12-6 record, hasn't seen a minute of action this year. Hayward has also gotten votes for the Vezina Trophy 4 times, and spent 4 seasons in Winnipeg before heading to Montreal. He has an overall record of 134, 123, and 33 in 8 seasons. Also that same day, Clarke sent Don Barber in future considerations in exchange for Doug Smale and more future considerations to the Winnipeg Jets. Smale has been a very popular player among Winnipeg fans for 10 years he has played there, and his capabilities on the check and defensive plays with the Stars could use with constant lineup changes and injuries. They need consistency, easy for me to say, on those lower lines. Smale was off to a terrible start, however, after 50 games for a lowly Jets team this year, but in his career he had 189 goals and 208 assists for 397 points in 691 career games and was a plus 12, and shows he can contribute in significant ways. He also played in his first NHL All-Star game last season in 1990 and has scored 14 shorthanded goals, showing tremendous penalty kill prowess throughout his career, and shares the NHL record for fastest goal to start a game in just 5 seconds. And above all, he brings veteran depth to the club even further so. The Stars return home and would face the Nordiques again, and while it wasn't easy, Smale's debut saw him notch an assist. Brian Glynn played a great game, as did Larry Murphy, while Casey was sharp in net again, and the Stars are now unbeaten in 3 games, and perhaps this shows I'm not even going to try to joke this time. Yeah, but hey, the good news was it wasn't a 7-game winless streak. No, this time it was only 6. Much to be said for progress, I say. First was a competitive game with the Hartford Whalers, which saw the Stars drop a heartbreaking 3-2 loss in overtime. Brian Glynn in on both goals for the Stars, with a goal and a helper. Then a rookie sensation by the name of Jaromir Jagr, along with his teammates on the Pittsburgh Penguins, easily took down the Stars 4-1. Casey had a rough night on that one. Bellows breaking his little slump, however, scoring a lone goal for the Stars in that game. The next game at home against the New York Rangers, Brian Hayward made his first start net for the Stars, and he made some huge saves, 28 in total, but they'd lose to the Rangers 4-2, thanks to the opposing goalie Mike Richter stopping over 30 shots and 2 goals from Ray Shepard. They then hosted the Blues, who were rolling and lost 3-2, as Prop was in on both Stars' goal with a notch and an apple, and bad news for the Stars. John Casey is injured. But anyway, Prop replicated that performance, this time in a tie against the New York Rangers 2-2, and Hayward played a beauty with 35 saves. And next up was the struggling Red Wings club, who were faltering after a pretty decent start, and won 4-3 over the Stars. This is only the 3rd time this month that they have scored more than 2 goals. Prop in this outing had 3 straight 2-point games with his 2 assists, giving him 6 points in 3 games. He was the only forward really producing him all that much during this stretch. While Modano was playing decently, Bellows and Broughton were playing very poorly and were actually called out for it, as Bellows, who had a banner year last season, was taken to task for his, quote, lack of drive, while Broughton is being called washed up. Also, defenseman Larry Murphy, much like he would be in Toronto 5 years later, also was becoming somewhat of a whipping boy, but only on a smaller scale. He played brutally in the Red Wings' loss. In this winless stretch, Bellows had just 3 points and was a -5. Broughton had 2 points and was a -1, while Gainey missed 4 games in this stretch, and to top it off, Stu Gavin, their top defensive forward, was out for the foreseeable future with a serious knee injury. But then the Stars came to light to end this streak, a huge 6-4 win over Trevor Linden and a growing Vancouver Canucks club, and Brian Bellows shut a lot of people up with his 5th career hat trick and an assist for 4 points. Also, Gainey looked outstanding, 4 assists, while Prop now has 8 points in 4 games with 2 goals in this outing, and he seems back to his old self. Murphy also answered his critics with a big game. Ulf Dallin played his best game so far this year, and Tenorti looks sharp. The big guns are shooting and firing all cylinders in this one. John Casey returned to make 34 saves in the win, but can they keep it up? After a big win like this, can it be a momentum changer? And no. It looked like it was going well against the Devils, and the Stars were up 3-1 after the first period and held that lead into the second intermission. They completely fell apart in the third and will lose 5-3. Broughton plays well, Hayward does not. And then, despite combining for 10 goals in their win over the Canucks, it was a 1-1 tie this time around. The John Casey played an incredible game with 32 saves. The Stars, however, ended the month with a strong in a road win over Phil Housley and the struggling Winnipeg Jets 4-2. Defenseman Tenorti and Chambers play superbly, while John Casey puts on another show, 32 saves, and Doug Smale scores against his former team. The Stars go 4-7-3 in the month of November, better than the opening month, but still nothing really to brag about. They still sit in 4th place, again their saving grace being they're still not quite as bad as Toronto. They sit 7 points ahead of them, but now are 9 points behind the Red Wings, who had picked things up again towards the end of the month. A far cry for them are the Blues and the Hawks battling for first place, with their rivals out of view in the rearview mirrors. And indeed, Stars are only averaging 2.5 goals a game. With the lineup they have, that's just unacceptable. They already have a talented goalie, now they need goals. Speaking of which, nobody on the Stars even averaged a point a game this month. Brian Propp, however, was far and away their best forward, and played excellently as he was being praised as getting back to form, and the way he was just a few years prior in Philadelphia. He led the team with 12 points, 6 each with notches and apples, and was a +2, while Neil Broughton, despite a very bad stretch of games, played well in others, had a goal and 10 assists, leading the team in the latter all month, and had 11 points. He was also a +3. Bellows was very inconsistent, but still came in third with 10 points, having 5 on each side of the scoring spectrum. Gainey played okay, but missed a few games, and Modano was having consistency issues. Bobby Smith actually played pretty badly in November. When you have 6 talents such as are the top core here, and having 2.5 goals a game, it's downright crime. 4 of the 6 players in this list had reached 1,000 career points by the time they retired, and another just had over 900. Losing Stu Gavin could have been costly, but hey, Doug Smale at least has been a boost to the lower lines, while Ilka Sinisalo's not being able to regain his scoring touch has shown some improvement. Same for Ulf Dallin and Gaetan Duchesne despite missing some games, but Dallin and Sinisalo need to get their scoring going. The defenseman showed some huge improvement this month, and the return of Mark Tinordi was indeed a huge boost, as he led the team with a big +7 and was by far the best defenseman on the team all month. His 5 assists tied Larry Murphy's 5 points as leading defenseman in scoring. Murphy played pretty well, but to face criticism in some games, and some say he wasn't the same as he was in Washington. But it was still seen as a key piece to the puzzle by his teammates and the media. Sean Chambers, who has played a few seasons now with the Stars, has been a decent hand in the past, but actually played excellently in November. Rob Zettler played okay in some games, while team captain Kurt Giles wasn't quite as effective as he was in October. New acquisition Brian Glynn played a couple really good games, but struggled in others. John Casey was excellent in November with a huge 2.55 goals against average and an amazing .905 save percentage, and also obtained a shutout and had a good 4-4-2 record. And so far, this has been the only Stars goalie this season to win any games, and proving that he is indeed a top-notch talent at this time, and his defense is improving, yet the lack of goals with a goaltender this talented, you need to score more to win games. Brian Hayward, acquired from Montreal early in the month, has played pretty well in a few games, but his numbers aren't that great. A mediocre 885 save percentage and a goals against average of 3.19, which isn't terrible, but he's lost 3 of his 4 starts and tying 1. There's hopes he can still capture the success he had in Montreal. The month of December, however, started out well for the Stars. A huge 6-3 win over a sluggish-looking Pittsburgh Penguins team at home. Tied 3-3 going into the third, the Stars ran away with the game. Broughton was outstanding with 3 points, while Barrison played his best game all year with 2 goals. Propp continues to roll, while Bobby Smith also played fantastic in this outing. And Sean Chambers continues to show how important he is to the Stars' defense. Good way to start the holiday month. Then it was a home-and-home series against division rivals Toronto, and these games matter in the sense that the Stars can build a good, nice cushion on 4th place and that final division spot, and did so at first with a 3-2 win, with Tinordi getting the game-winning goal with under 5 minutes to play, and Brian Hayward getting his first win of the year and first as a member of the Stars, playing very well in the process with 26 saves. However, in the game at home, Peter Ing was superb in net for the Leafs, and yes, it was hard for me to say that with a straight face, but on this night he really was. The first 2 periods were scoreless. Smale got a goal at the midway point, but the Leafs tied it with 1:32 to play, and Rob Ramage won it for them in OT. Either way, the Stars didn't look so bad this month. And they get some bad news. Sean Chambers is injured and out for the foreseeable future. Not good. However, the Stars throttled the Philadelphia Flyers 7-0. A tremendous all-around team effort. Modano plays a huge game. A goal, 2 assists, 3 points. Taglianetti and Tinordi both played very well. Larry Murphy, Brian Propp, Neil Broughton, outstanding. And Hayward gets a 22-save shutout with the win. Now dating back to their win against Winnipeg to end November, the Stars have now won 4 of their last 5 and are unbeaten in 5 of their last 6. But then they made a pretty shocking trade. On December 11th, in a trade with the Pittsburgh Penguins, 2 defensemen on each side were swapped. As the Stars received Chris Dalkus and Jim Johnson, the Stars sent Peter Taglianetti, who had just been inserted back into the lineup and was playing pretty well the past couple of games, and Larry Murphy. According to an interview that Murphy did on the Spit and Chicklets podcast not all that long ago, this was the one trade in his career he didn't see coming and was blindsided by it. Bob Gainey was allegedly not informed beforehand, and the rumor goes he was angry at Clarke for making this deal without consulting him, feeling Murphy was a big part of this team. But let's see what they're getting. Dalkus was actually born in Minnesota in the town of Findlay and played parts of 6 seasons with the Penguins. and had 36 points in 195 games, but is not an offensive defenseman. And despite a slightly below average -8, he seemed to be growing in his game as a traditional defenseman, and it seemed as if Clarke's goal was to build the defense more around Tenorti's style. He is playing fairly well this season in the 22 games for Pittsburgh. Johnson was a tough, gritty defenseman who has played 6 seasons all for the Penguins. He is quite rock solid and provided a great deal of aggression on the defensive court. He could hit hard. The Stars wanted more of that. And with Chambers injured, they were thinking this could be the right move. He has played 390 games, amassed 658 penalty minutes, a pretty good 109 points despite not being an overly offensive defenseman. And despite being a mere -3, he had good seasons with that stat, especially in 88-89, and has played for Team USA 4 times at the World Championship, a good blue liner, and a trade, however, that many even today still question. Both of them suited up to play against the Fleury, Gilmore, McInnes, and the powerful Flames, and neither made much of a dent. And the Stars trailed 5-1 after 2 periods as John Casey played one of his worst games this year. However, the Stars got the place cheering, making an attempt at a comeback, and trailed by a goal with just 5 minutes left. But they came up short, losing 5-4. Broughton, however, stays red hot in on all 4 goals, a goal and 3 assists. Modano plays epically well and has a goal and 2 helpers. Gainey had 2 goals and Smale had 2 assists. The big guns are firing on this one despite the loss. But then it was a loss to division rivals Blues, who looked nearly unstoppable. But the Stars had to have a 2-0 lead after 1 period, but collapsed and lost 4-2. Bellows again facing scrutiny, as he has played very poorly so far this month. It didn't look promising with an upcoming home series with a team that was proving to be the best in the league that rivaled the Chicago Blackhawks. But the Stars stunned them, a dominant 5-win at home. Oh my goodness, this was the most cohesive unit they had been all year, much like they were against the Flyers. Their defense and grinders were all over the Hawks. Bobby Smith was all over the young Jeremy Roenick, while Smale and Duchesne didn't give Steve Larmer any room to work with, and Mark Tenorti was great at creating situations and turnovers and also had 2 assists, as did Neil Broughton yet again. While Ulf Dallin was also giving the Hawks a headache. This one was huge, also giving rookie sensation Ed Belfour a rough night in net. But the next game at Chicago Stadium, the Hawks dished it right back, as Casey had a bad night and Roenick had a hat-trick against them. The Stars lose 5-2. And the losses came on further, with a road loss to Pittsburgh. The Pens led 2-0 in the first. By the end of the second, the Pens led 3-2 as the Stars drew it closer. Broughton scored a goal, his second of the game with 3:06 to play, and Mark Recchi, however, scored with 54 seconds left to hand the Stars this loss. Even despite good games from Broughton, Dallin, and Hayward, as well as the return of Stu Gavin, the Stars were embarrassed by the Bruins for their 3rd loss in a row. Hayward lets in 4 goals by early in the second period, and is pulled. The Stars lose 6-2, and again, he now faces criticism for his play as of late, while Jim Johnson played brutally. In a Festivus showdown on the road against Harvard, Gainey answered his critics, a huge hat-trick and a 5-2 win over the Whalers. Dallin continues to contribute and play well, while Tenorti leads the defense quite well. Broughton is just rolling, and Rob Zeller plays a good game, and Casey is solid in net. But then they end the month with a 3-game winless streak. First, a tough 6-4 loss to the flightless Jets, despite solid games from Bellows, Dalkos, and Giles, and Tenorti had a rough game, as did Casey. However, they played an exciting outing in a rematch with the Bruins. The Stars let their 2-1 lead slip in the third and trailed 4-2 with 3:08 to go, but goals from Dallin and Gainey 20 seconds apart tied the game, and the Stars still got a point out of it with a tie. Bellows is starting to play better again, and while Dallin is superb with 2 goals and a helper, Johnson plays his best game since the trade and is a huge +4. Casey made 28 saves. But Gretzky and the Kings came to town in a New Year's Eve showdown, and the Stars lost 4-2, despite launching 35 shots on Kings goalie Daniel Berthome. Well, this has been the Stars' best month so far. 5-8-1, 14 games. Still not great, but at the beginning of the month, they looked fantastic and looked like they were showing huge improvements. But many still question just how the Larry Murphy trade was going to take shape. The Stars now sit at 11-23-7 for 29 points. Now, 4th place ain't so comfortable in the Norris Division, as the Leafs are now just 3 points behind them in this spot, and the Wings have moved further ahead in 3rd, while the Blues remain in 2nd and the Blackhawks are in 1st. But their goal scoring has improved heavily, as this month they average more than 3.5 goals a game, and it's just what they needed. The top forwards, after lacking a lot this season, really came to play this month. Neil Broughton was tremendous. 7 goals, 11 assists, 18 points. And again, he was showing great leadership, an excellent face-off circle, and he was playing much like he did years prior, and seems to be healthier than ever. Dave Gainey had a rough patch of games, but would explode at certain moments, obtaining that hat-trick, and led the team with 11 goals. Oh wow, and had 14 points coming in the second. Then in a three-way tie for third place, Old Dallin, after battling injury and inconsistency, really came alive with 6 goals and 5 assists for 11 points, and was good in checking situations. Sophomore Mike Modano, who's been a bit hot and cold this season, was hotter more often than not this month in December, 5 goals, 6 assists, and also a +3 making big plays. Brian Propp, still staying one of the best forwards on the team, had 3 goals and 8 assists for 11 points. Bellows had a lot of struggles this month, but played very well in some games. Ilka Sinisalo played really good this month too, as that investment was starting to pay off, as Doug Smale continues to be good in his role, while Bobby Smith took on an effective defensive role this month. Perry Berezin was alright. Stu Gavin played in some games, but was not in the best shape and would be out soon again, while Gaetan Duchesne really stepped up his game in the defensive role he was brought there to play. Speaking of Duchesne, his presence in these situations was amazing. He was tied with Neil Broughton for a team-leading +4 in December. On defense, Mark Tenorti led all defensemen in scoring with 2 goals and 5 assists for 7 points, and was the best blue liner on the team all month. The arrivals of Jim Johnson and Chris Dahlquist from Pittsburgh seemed to help a fair bit, as they both played well and consistent since their arrival. Kurt Giles and Brian Glynn also played some very good games, and Rob Zeller showed a lot of improvement. The defense needed to step up in the absence of Chambers' injury, and they did for the most part. However, just when the Stars are playing better up front and improving defensively, John Casey's game was not very good at all this month. His 3-5-1 record was, meh enough, but his goals against average increased from his excellent numbers in November and went up almost a full goal. And a bad .863 save percentage showed he was falling apart in many games, as he was losing them several games. Hayward, despite only playing 5 games and only winning 2, was much better. Not only did he obtain a shutout, he also had a good 3.19 goals against average and an improved .893 save percentage. Now the Stars had the one thing they thought they wouldn't deal with all season, a goaltending issue. The winless skid spilled into the new year of January 1991, beginning with a brutal outing against the Detroit Red Wings, where Broughton perhaps played the worst game he has played so far this year, and Hayward was awful in the 6-2 loss. The Stars faced another division rival, the Leafs, and ceded to a 3-3 tie, John Casey making 26 saves in that one. What followed after that was back and forth competitive battle with the Canucks. Despite Modano having a great night with 2 goals and assists for 3 points, the Stars would lose 6-5, and the winless streak had hit 6. They did, however, finally break the streak with a win over the lowly New York Islanders, a 3-0 win where Tenorti and Giles and the defense were outstanding, as were Duchesne and Smale. Tremendous heavy team-oriented effort, as Hayward got the 15-save shutout. Well, if they can work like this more often, it's a 3-game losing streak next. Despite leading 3-2 in the third period on the strength of a good night from Gainey, they fell apart and lost 5-3 to Dale Hawerchuk and the Sabres. The Stars did take the fight to the Blackhawks, as Bellows played a great game with 2 goals and a helper, and Gainey had the opposite with a goal and 2 apples, each with 3 points, and Propp had 2 assists. Well, the Stars' goaltending is really becoming a big problem at this point, and they dropped another 5-3 decision. Then they allowed 15 goals in 3 games total, giving up another 5 and a 5-1 loss to the Habs, and Sinisalo scoring the lone goal in that one. Some fans and much of the media are calling for Gainey to be fired, and there was even a rumor at the time that could very well happen, but apparently Clarke had no plans to fire his coach. He at least wanted to see this season through. Also, Broughton is facing a lot of criticisms. He's not playing even half as well as he was the prior month. The Stars lit up former alum Don Beaupre, however, and the Washington Capitals 5-2 in another big cohesive effort to up and down the lineup. Bellows plays very well once again. Tenorti has another huge game, and Hayward is great in net with 34 saves. But now it's time for the NHL All-Star break. Now, on January 19, 1991, in Chicago, the NHL All-Star Game took place, and with the U.S. at war in Iraq, a very emotional rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner playing, standing in line with the rest of the Campbell Conference, were North Star Selection's Bobby Smith, appearing in his 4th All-Star Game as he was a special selection on behalf of the league, while Dave Gainey earned his first selection and scored the first goal of the game en route to a Campbell Conference 11-5 victory. Returning from the break, however, they couldn't keep up their momentum and dropped a 2-0 loss to the Jets, but they overall were playing a focused game. Jets goalie Bob Essenges just happened to be on fire this night, and Hayward played solid in net again. Back home at the Met Center, however, the Stars came alive and sent a message to their top-tier rivals, the St. Louis Blues, with a huge 7-3 win. Brian Propp had a goal and 2 assists for 3 points. Bellows had 2 goals, while Gainey, Giles, Berezin, Glynn, and Smith all had great games. The Stars really looked like a powerful club on this night. The Stars then skated to a 2-2 tie with the Capitals after that. Then John Casey put on a huge show in a road win against the Devils 3-1 as a goaltender made 32 saves like he did earlier in the season. However, for whatever reason, Peter Ing, of all goaltenders in the league, seems to be the Stars' kryptonite in a lot of ways, as they dropped the 4-0 loss to the Leafs despite firing on the goaltender, who is now basically a trivia question on a quiz night at a sports bar in Oshawa 32 times. Toronto had a rough outing in this one. But the Stars ended the month strong, as they've now only lost one of their last 5 games and had a big 5-2 win over the Red Wings, who were once again starting to falter. Bellows continues to play very well with 2 goals, while Tenorti bounced back from his bad night in Toronto. Dahlquist had a good night, and Casey was incredible again with 32 saves. So again, this is the right way to end the month for the Stars. And the North Stars went 5-7-2 in January, a slight improvement, close to last month, but unlike last month, a lot of the games they were winning seemed to have a new system that Gainey was working with, and yes, you always win as a team and lose as a team, but the way he was utilizing everyone seemed to result in either wins or spirited efforts in the losses in the month. But many still believe Gainey was not qualified for the job and that Clarke can't even come close to capturing what he had in Philly. The Stars once again still sit at 4th place, still 41 points, and they have a really good cushion on the Leafs once again, who are now 10 points ahead of them for 4th place in that final playoff spot. And with the Red Wings going on a large losing streak, the Stars sit 8 points behind them for 3rd, while the Blues and Hawks are pretty much alone battling for 1st. The Stars were averaging 3 goals a game, a slight dip but still better than most this season. Brian Bellows and Brian Propp shared the team lead for points, as Bellows led the team in goals with 7 and added 6 assists for 13 points. Propp added 3 notches and 10 apples for 13, and he has been their most consistent forward, I would say, all season so far. Dave Gainey, however, may have been, well, probably their best, most skilled forward this year, with 6 goals and 5 assists for 11 points to finish 3rd in team scoring. Neil Broughton does not appear on the list this month, and he did not play very well at all most of the month, and was a team worst -8 after tying the team lead for +- last month. Modano played well, but saw a slip in production himself, while Ulf Dallin and Gaetan Duchesne played very well on the grinding lines, while Doug Smale was actually somewhat lackluster this month, but Bobby Smith had a really good month in that regard, while Sincella had some rough outings when he wasn't out of action, and Gavin had a few good games before getting hurt again, as did Berezan. Duchesne for the 2nd straight month leads the team in +-, this time with a +5, as after a not-so-stellar start, he is back to the player he seems to have been in Washington, and has been awesome for the Stars in special situations such as the penalty kill and containing top players. Mark Tenorti again led the team's defensemen in points, with 5 all being assists, and he was certainly the best once again, but Chris Dahlquist and Kurt Giles both played extremely well on the blue line, while Jim Johnson actually played excellently in many games. Neil Wilkinson, however, struggled a great deal. Either way, the Stars' defense is coming together despite injury issues and lineup changes. John Casey, despite recent struggles, was finding his footing by the end of the month and made some improvements to his goals against average as well as his save percentage, and he won just 2 games, however. Brian Hayward was really good with a 2.87 goals against average, and despite a couple of rough games, but either way, he got another shutout and won 3 of them. If goaltending keeps progressing, things, could change for the Stars in a better way. The big guns came out shooting hard against Quebec to begin February. What a game, 6-4 win for the Stars. Bello, goal, 2 assists, 3 points. Propp, 2 notches, 2 apples, 4 points total. And Gainey, a goal, 4 helpers, 5 points. This is what the Stars need to do. The Stars received heavy praise for their performance, and they continue to look like a team. 2 days later at the Montreal Forum, however, things didn't go quite as well. Despite taking a 2-0 lead into the first intermission, the team fell apart. Giles, Glenn, and Modano were particularly called out for their poor performances in what ended up being a 5-3 loss, a bit of a setback for our heroes. But then they had back-to-back home games against division rivals. First, it was the Leafs, who they now have an 11-point lead on in the final Norris Division playoff spot with a 4-2 win. Huge games from Bellows and Broughton with 2 goals and 2 assists respectively. It was quite a game against the struggling Red Wings, however. Gainey continues to roll as he has been playing excellently, as he had a goal and 2 assists for 3 points in the win. While Propp and Modano also play very well, the Stars led 6-2 and had to hold off a Red Wing comeback attempt, but still survived the game with a 6-5 win, meaning the Stars have won 4 of their last 5 games. However, they came up short against the Islanders on the road, a seesaw game that the Isles took control of in the 3rd period. Hayward wasn't all that stellar in net. Gainey and Propp were good, and despite the all-great game, Bellows and Broughton's consistency is a problem again. The very next day, Broughton and Bellows came alive again, however, and what was a wild shootout with Buffalo, a 6-6 tie. But the Stars blew a 4-1 lead as the goaltending continues to be a problem yet again. Gainey is one of the hottest forwards in the league, but due to the Stars being a blip on the radar screen, the wide coverage of the league barely notices this, despite the praise he gets back home for how he has played. But the Stars are still trying to focus on trying to better themselves, and it has shown despite their rough outings. They have not been dominated at all this month, and the tie against the Sabres would begin an unbeaten stretch. The first was a visit to Detroit, where the Stars' defense was rock solid, thanks to Mark Tenorti and Casey making the big saves when he had to. An 18-save shutout, his third of the year. They then hosted the defending Stanley Cup champion Edmonton Oilers and completely destroyed them 5-1 as the defense gave Casey a lot of breathing room, and Modano was sensational, 2 goals, 2 assists for 4 points, while Gainey continues to show his home crowd what the league is missing with 3 assists. Bellows and Broughton also play very well here to boot, while Wilkinson and Johnson play amazingly on the blue line. Then it was a huge game against division leaders, the Chicago Blackhawks at home. It was back and forth and ended in a 3-3 tie, the Stars keeping up every step of the way with the big guns, as goaltenders Ed Belfour and John Casey put on a spectacle in net. Casey playing his biggest individual performance in a while with 36 saves. Gainey stays hot, and also credit to an unsung hero, Bobby Smith, who's been excellent in February and in this game as well. The Stars then bombarded Ken Reggett of the Flyers with many shots on goal, but were trailing 2-0 in the third. But an early goal in the frame by Modano and a tying goal of Broughton with 1:09 to play sent the Mets center into a frenzy, and they were able to get the point and the tie. The 5-game unbeaten streak to end the month of February? Hey, that's not bad at all. Speaking of not bad at all, however, the Stars went 5-2-3 in 10 games in February, their best month so far this season, and they currently sit at 21-32-12, 54 points, and comfortably sit 11 points ahead of the Leafs. So clinching a playoff spot shouldn't be too hard at this point, with just 15 games to go. The Red Wings, despite their struggles, sit at third at 10 points ahead of the Stars, while the Blackhawks and the Blues have clinched their playoff spots and are simply battling for first place. Either way, in the final stretch of the season, it's fair to say Gainey has exceeded expectations. I mean, the team seems to be coming together more than ever this year at this point, and you got to give him a lot of credit for that. Speaking of credit, Dave Gainey is amazing this month, and his 10-game point streak, which indeed began the first game of February, has now reached 6 goals, 16 assists for 22 points in those 10 games, averaging just above 2 points a game. Remarkable. He is looking top-notch, and the Stars are garnering more points because of it. By far the best skater they have at this point. Brian Bellows, despite some iffy outings, still tied for second in scoring with 13 points, leading the team with 8 goals. He can really pop up a big game when you least expect it. While Mike Modano overall game evolves, and he had 2 notches, 13 points, 6 goals, and 7 assists. The sophomore sensation has also had his rough times this year, but continues to mold his game to the best of his abilities. Neil Broughton, however, was not overly good again this month despite the odd decent outing. While Brian Propp was excellent and stayed consistent, Bobby Smith was a true workhorse out there at all ends of the ice, really showing he was a good addition to this club after all. Dallin, Duchesne, Bearson, and Smale were all rock solid in their roles, especially on the penalty kill, which had seen some rough moments as well this year, but has started to improve. Dave Gainey's +5 led the team all month to the surprise of literally nobody, as he was creating positive situations more often than not. Tied for the scoring lead amongst defenses, Chris Dalkus, who had a good month with 2 goals and 2 helpers, while again, Mark Tenorti, a goal and 3 helpers for each for 4 points. Tenorti's had some good games, but wasn't the best defensive this month, as Mark Johnson, I'd say, was far and away their best blue liner, as he has a major reason for the lack of pressure John Casey has faced lately, and made skaters pay a price for getting in his path. Kurt Giles again stayed really good, and also showing again his captaincy qualities game in and game out. And also Brian Glynn was playing good hockey, but the big surprise was actually Neil Wilkinson, who had been much under the radar this year, but showed he could offer this team quite a bit when he suits up. Well, John Casey has returned to form, not having lost a game all month and winning all 5 and tying the other 3, was a very good 2.87 goals against average and an okay 888 save percentage, as he wasn't facing as many shots in games this month due to the improved play of the team's defense, but he's almost back to what he was earlier in the season, and if he can do that, the Stars could finish the last month of the season red hot. He also obtained his 3rd shutout of the year. Brian Hayward in his 2 games, well, and he not only lost both, but he was actually outright terrible. A horrendous 4.58 goals against average and a pathetic 847 save percentage. It looked like all that long ago he was vying for the top goaltender spot and making a decent case for himself, but it's clear he's not material for that in Minnesota. So here we go. 1 month to play, 15 games. The Leafs aren't posing much of a threat for that 4th and final North Division playoff spot. and the Wings are a huge question mark. Now, if the Stars can stay the course they made in February, with Casey getting back to himself, the defense improving month by month, and the Top Guns keep firing the goals, the Stars could still try for a .500 record even, and perhaps even catch the Wings. They would extend their unbeaten streak to 6 games with a 1-1 tie against the Oilers. Hayward with a great performance in net this time, Gainey keeping his scoring streak going with the Stars' lone goal in that one. Gainey, however, is suffering minor injury issues and missed part 2 of the Alberta road trip against the Calgary Flames, who took the Stars apart 5-1. The defense just crumbled here in this one. The Stars made a couple deals during the deadline, acquiring gritty Mark Bureau from the Flames, and exchanging a 3rd-round pick and cutting ties with Ilka Sinsalo, sending him to LA for an 8th-round draft pick in 1991. But Gainey returning got the Stars back on track on a huge 5-1 win over the Oilers as the Stars return home. Gainey has 3 assists in the win, and also saw the return of Sean Chambers and Stu Gavin. Then a massive 6-2 win over the Detroit Red Wings, where the story of the game was Ulf Dahlen, a hat trick, 3 goals, added 2 assists for 5 points. The second hat trick of his career and his first since October 23rd, 1987. Also, Bellows had 3 assists in the win. Then it was a big 7-3 win over Calgary, where Mark Tenorti played a tremendous outing with a goal, 2 assists for 3 points. And again, his defensive game was still accurate. And then it was a 5-2 win over Buffalo, where again, he's still rolling. Jim Johnson is a +4, playing tremendous hockey. And Casey plays excellently, stopping 30 shots. And they've hit a 4-game winning streak. That's their longest of the season of just wins. And then in a showdown with the Blues, the streak was about to end as the Stars were down 2-1 in the final minute. With 11 seconds left, Neil Broughton made the perfect setup for Mike Modano to score. While the Stars couldn't keep the win streak going in OT, they are now unbeaten in 5. The Stars just need to beat the Leafs to clinch the playoffs. And it was a home-and-home series, and the unbeaten streak is broken, and it didn't sadly go down a good way at Maple Leaf Gardens. The Stars let a 3-1 lead slip. The game went into overtime, they would lose 4-3. Bobby Smith had 2 assists in the loss. The Leafs still hanging on by a thread, but back home it was official. In a game that saw Brian Bellows score his 30th goal of the year, reaching the mark for the 6th time in his career. Also new acquisition Mark Bureau notching 2 assists. Mike Modano once again playing clutch hero, scoring the game winner. The Minnesota North Stars have clinched the playoffs and have officially eliminated the Toronto Maple Leafs. And with 6 games remaining and the Red Wings at 8 points ahead, they could make a run for 3rd place. But that didn't happen. A 4-game losing streak would follow. A loss to the Capitals 3-1 ended the 18-game point streak of Dave Gainey, who got a tremendous reception from the Stars crowd due to his play as of late, where he had 10 goals, 23 assists for 33 points in that stretch. Wow. Then in a showdown with Chicago, the Stars were getting decimated 5-1 going into the 3rd period. They made an attempt at a comeback, but came up short, losing 5-4 despite a great game from Bellows again, 3 points. They are competitive with the Blues in a back-and-forth battle, but would come up short in another 5-4 loss, despite Tenorti and Smith each notching 3 points. And despite 2 goals from Modano, the Stars lose to the Kings 6-5. And while the Stars weren't getting dominated, 4 losses in a row was not good down the final stretch. However, goaltender John Casey was amazing in net as the Stars shocked the Blackhawks 2-1. Casey made 27 saves in the win, while Belfour put on a show on the other side. However, the Stars' defensive checking course shut down the likes of Larmer, Roenick, and Goulet. And at last, the final game of the season against the St. Louis Blues, Hayward was amazing in net. The Blues squeaked out with the win, however, 2-1, showing the Stars could really compete with their division leaders in those final 2 games. But stuff like that happens all the time, right? One of their stronger months this season, but nowhere quite as good as February, is finishing the final 15 games 6-7-2, and finishing the season where they have been for most of it in 4th place. 27, 39, and 14 is the final record for 68 points and clinching the final playoff spot with the commanding lead over the eliminated Leafs by 11 points. This would be looked at as just a forgettable season, it seems, where the team was below average with some bright spots, and they had some unexpected bursts of wins and unbeaten streaks. And of course, they think they have their in over their head GM. Couldn't take them any further than they've been the last couple of years prior. As a matter of fact, this is 9 wins less than the Stars had last year. A first-round exit is surely on the cards as they'll have to face Chicago in the playoffs, who are the best team not only just their division but in the entire league, won the President's Trophy, while the Blues were the 2nd best team in the league, finishing just a point behind the Hawks. Their battle for first place was the only thing making headlines in the North Division at all. The Stars were barely showing up on the radar screen amongst North American coverage. The Stars' big guns, however, were firing on all cylinders this month as Brian Bellows had his best month all season with 8 goals, 8 assists for 16 points and was a +2. And he seemed to be showing a lot of hustle in that final stretch. Tied with him for 16 points was, big surprise, Brian Propp, who continued to stay consistent and play very well on all ends of the ice. And third, more of a surprise, Dave Gainey, 15 points, and was one of the hottest players in the league in the second half of the season, but sadly didn't get the recognition he deserved. Neil Broughton played a lot better than he had in the last couple months, and was effective in defensive situations as well. Bobby Smith continued to be a workhorse out there, getting even some of his scoring spark. And Mike Modano came up big in the clutch and had a really good month. Ulf Dallin was excellent, while the return of Stu Gavin wasn't as impactful as one might think. Doug Smale was hit or miss in some games, as was Deschene. The Stars did average close to 3.5 goals per game this month. Neil Broughton again played a much more disciplined and focused game in the final month of the season and led the team with a +5 as a result, just a couple months after being a team worse in 1 month with a -8, and became a killer in the face-off circle, and showed despite how rough things became the new year that he still had a lot to offer this team and was truly a heart and soul. And to no shock, Mark Tenori led the team yet again in defensive scoring, but what is shocking is that he did with 2 goals and 9 assists for 11 points, and while he has led defense in scoring all but 1 month this year, that being October where he only played 3 games, his stats weren't as big as many defensemen of this era, and again, that were usually top scorers with amongst their team. Overall, he was excellent this month despite the scoring. Even if he scored lower, he still played a very good defensive game, while Johnson and Glynn were very good. Chambers returned but took some time to find his footing, while Dalquist struggled and Captain Kurt Giles was tremendous. Both goaltenders put up really good numbers this month, as John Casey was excellent with a 5-4-1 record and a really good 2.90 goals against average and an excellent .896 save percentage. Despite Hayward only winning 1 game, he turned in a lot of good performances even in the losses and was a lot better than he was in February. He had a really good goals against average himself of 2.94 and even had a better save percentage of Casey with just 1/1000th point shy of 900. So both goalies look good heading into the postseason, as this is one of those rare times they seem to be on the same page in terms of numbers. And hey, that does it for March. That does it for the season. But now let's take a look at the final numbers. In a strange turn of events, the Stars scored 28 goals less than the 1989-90 season, yet were 15th with 256 this year compared to 16th last season. And with some of the forward talent they have, this is a bit of a letdown. They let in 25 less goals than the year before with 266, allowing the 10th least amount of goals in the league out of 21 teams, and I'd say that's quite good, and that of course thanks to most part to John Casey's outstanding play. Their power play showed slight improvement, going from 11th to 9th, thanks in large part to Dave Gainey and Brian Bellows. And then their penalty kill, which was one of the best in the league last season, faltered from 5 all the way down to 12th, despite some strong checkers and killers being on the team this year, and however it did show improvement late in the season. Dave Gainey led the team in scoring for the second time in his career, as he did so in 1988-89. Has a career year this year with 40 goals, leading the team and 42 assists for 82 points in 73 games. His amazing streak towards the end of the season showed just how good he really could be. Brian Bellows this season was a far cry from last year, scoring 20 goals less and 24 points less than the year prior, with 35 goals, 40 assists for 75 points. It was actually a team worst -13, but be that as it may, it was still very important on the power play. He had some excellent showings despite his consistency issues this season, and while Brian Propp had a comeback season doing what he did in Philly, being a danger from the left side, with 26 goals, 47 assists for 73 points, and a +7 and missed just 1 game this year, as Clarke's gamble with him paid off. As for the other forwards, Neil Broughton led the team in assists with 56, and had a rough couple months in the new year, but it still proved he was an asset to the club. Bobby Smith couldn't return to form in terms of scoring prowess, but he was still good in special situations, and had played some really good games. Mike Modano's sophomore year saw a slight decline in his numbers from his rookie year, but his future is still looking very bright. Ulf Dallin started to slow down, but contributed in big ways as the season went on, while role players and grinders and veterans such as Gaetan Duchesne and Doug Smale did their part in a good way. Perry Berrazan was good on many nights, and so was Stu Gavin despite missing many games this season. Their power play, which was strong, saw 2 skaters make it to the top 10 amongst power play goals. Dave Gainey was 4th in the extra man advantage with 20 on the year, only 2 behind Joe Nieuwendyk and former teammate Mike Gartner, as Brett Hall ran away with first place in that category. Brian Bellows' 17 extra man scores were tied for 8th, along with Steve Larmer of the Hawks and Al McInnes of the Flames. Kennedy, along with defenseman Jim Johnson, who was acquired in that big Larry Murphy trade from Pittsburgh, led the team each with a +9 this season. And Johnson proved to be a very good addition to the club and delivered on what was a tough Stern blue line. Mark Tenorti, to no surprise, led all defensemen scoring on the Stars with 5 goals and 27 assists for 32 points in 69 games. Tenorti was ferocious out there, had the heart of a lion, and shows he is very underrated when it came to the best blue liners in the league at this time. Team captain Kurt Giles had one of the best seasons of his long career, proving that all-important leadership as well and creating problems for opposing forwards. The blue line saw a lot of different players due to injury issues. Brian Glynn played some excellent games, as did Neil Wilkinson, and Rob Zettler was hit or miss. Sean Chambers was among the best defenders on that team going into the season, but only played 29 games. Chris Dahlquist wasn't always a force out there, but he had a lot of good nights this season. However, it's bold to say John Casey was the biggest star on the team this year. He was excellent in net more often than not, and despite the team's woes, he finished 21, 20, and 11 with a goals against average just under 3, a very good number, with 3 shutouts and a good 891 save percentage. He truly was the man standing on his head many nights. Brian Hayward's numbers, however, were nowhere near as good as his days in Montreal, with a not-so-good record of 6 wins, 15 losses, and 3 ties, but his 3.14 goals against average isn't so bad, and his 886 save percentage, well, maybe not much to write home about, but still notched 2 shutouts. Hayward may not have been great, but I think it's safe to predict that had the Stars hung on to either Kari Taco or Jarmo Millis, who only played 2 games each and lost them both, things could have been much worse. The 80s and 90s were a crazy time for goaltenders, as only 8 would have a goals against average under 3, and indeed one of them was John Casey, who indeed came in 8th with a 2.98 goals against average among all goaltenders in the NHL. Casey also finished tied for 5th in the league with 3 shutouts. Casey's performance got him a vote for the Vezina Trophy as the league's top goaltender, coming in 10th place. Also, Dave Gagne got some votes for the Selke Trophy, 3 to be exact, while Duchesne got 1. This is the extent of any Stars' presence for award season. Yep, a pretty mediocre season. Not much to look forward to on paper in the playoffs, but little did we know what was around the corner. And with that, stay tuned for part 2 of our look at the 1990-91 Minnesota North Stars, covering their tenure in the playoffs, which shocked the world. Until then, like and share the video, subscribe to the channel, and until next time, I'll see ya!